Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished cleaning the air filters in Section C of New Geneva Station. His maintenance shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but he always stayed late to make sure everything was perfect. The station was humanity's newest pride, a massive wheel spinning slowly in space, where humans and aliens could meet and trade. He pulled his old violin case from his work locker. The instrument had traveled with him from the streets of Mexico City to the stars. Back on Earth, he used to play on subway platforms and street corners, earning just enough credits to survive. Now he fixed air systems and cleaned floors on a space station. But the music never left his heart. The Central Plaza was filling up with the evening crowd. Workers from dozens of different species walked through the wide space, heading to restaurants, shops, or transport pods. Jake found his usual spot near the big viewing window that showed the stars outside. He opened his case and took out the violin. The instrument was old and scratched, but it sang like an angel when he played it. Jake rosined his bow and tuned the strings. A few humans walking by smiled and dropped small coins into his open case. Most aliens just ignored him, like they always did. Jake closed his eyes and began to play Chasing Cars. The song was old, from before space travel, but it still made him feel something deep in his chest. The notes flowed out smooth and gentle, telling a story without words about love and dreams, and the simple wish to lie down somewhere safe with someone who cared. First, the plaza stayed busy as always. Aliens hurried past without looking. But then something strange happened. A tall, blue-skinned Zephyrian stopped walking. Ambassador Kefter was supposed to be heading to dinner with the Trade Council, but the sounds coming from the small human made his feet stop moving. The ambassador had lived for 300 years. He had seen the birth and death of stars, had negotiated peace between warring worlds, had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but he had never heard anything like this. The vibrations from the human's instrument seemed to reach inside his chest and touch something he didn't know existed. More aliens began to stop. A group of insect-like chitin traders paused mid-conversation. Their compound eyes turned toward Jake, and their antennae twitched in confusion. They felt something, but their language had no words for it. 3 Vorthan engineers, their rock-like skin usually showing no emotion, stood perfectly still. One of them, Tel 906, felt liquid forming in his optical sensors. He had no idea what was happening to him. High above in the station command center, Commander Lisa Brooks was watching the security feeds when her aide pointed to the plaza camera. "Ma'am, there's some kind of gathering forming down there." Lisa looked at the screen and saw the crowd growing around Jake. She recognized him from the work schedules. He was a good employee, always on time, never caused trouble. She knew about his music, but had never seen it draw this kind of attention. "Should we break it up?" asked the aide. "He doesn't have a permit for public performance." Lisa watched as more aliens joined the crowd. They weren't talking or moving. They just stood there, listening. Their faces showed expressions she had never seen before on non-human features. "No," she said quietly. "Let it continue." Jake kept playing, lost in the music. He didn't notice the crowd until he opened his eyes during a soft passage. At least 50 beings surrounded him in a wide circle. Some were standing, some sitting on the floor, some floating in the air. All of them were perfectly silent. The sight should have made him nervous, but somehow it felt right. The music was connecting them all, even though they came from different worlds under different stars. He played the melody again, letting it build slowly. Ambassador Kefter felt something wet on his scaled cheek. He touched it with a clawed finger and stared at the moisture. Zephyrians did not produce tears. Their bodies were not designed for it. Yet here he was, leaking fluid from his eyes while his chest felt tight and strange. A female Aquarian, her gills fluttering rapidly, sank to the floor. The water-breathing alien was wearing an environmental suit, but she could feel her heart beating in patterns she had never experienced. The sound vibrations traveled through her suit's liquid medium and seemed to make every cell in her body respond. Dr. Yelef, the station's chief medical officer, was a Centauran with 2 brains. She had stopped to investigate what she thought might be a medical emergency when she saw aliens behaving strangely. But now both of her brains were focused entirely on the patterns of sound coming from the human's instrument. Mathematical calculations that usually ran constantly in her mind had completely stopped. Jake played the final notes of the song, letting them hang in the air before fading to silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the station's systems and the quiet breathing of 50 different species. Then something unprecedented happened. Ambassador Kefter, senior diplomat of the Zephyrian Collective, began to clap his hands together. The gesture was purely human, something he had observed but never understood. Other aliens began to copy him, creating a soft thunder of appreciation. Jake stood there, bow still in his hand, staring at the crowd. In all his years of street performing, he had never seen anything like this. The aliens weren't just being polite. Something real had happened here. What was that? Asked Tel 906, his rock-like voice rough with unfamiliar emotion. Music, said Dr. Yelef, though the word felt insufficient. We have sounds for communication, said Ambassador Kefter. We have tones for data transfer. But this was something else entirely. Jake carefully placed his violin back in its case. His hands were shaking slightly. It's just a song, he said. It's about ... Well, it's about feeling close to someone, about wanting simple things. The aliens looked at each other with confusion and wonder. They had mastered faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation. They had built cities that floated in space and machines that could think. But none of them had ever created organized sound designed to make others feel specific emotions. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Jake collected the coins from his case. Along with the human credits, he found objects he didn't recognize. Alien coins, small crystals, even what looked like a piece of carved metal. They had given him what they could. Commander Brooks watched from above as the plaza returned to normal. But she knew something important had just happened. The way those aliens had reacted to Jake's music was unlike anything in the diplomatic files. Jake packed up his violin and headed toward his quarters. Tomorrow he would clean air filters and repair lighting systems. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at New Geneva Station, he felt like he had truly communicated with his alien neighbors. He had no way of knowing that in a few hours, news of the human sound weaver would begin spreading across the galaxy, carried by the aliens who had witnessed something they couldn't explain but would never forget. Admiral Ryan Clark stared at the reports flooding his desk at Earth Defense Fleet headquarters. In the past 3 days, he had received over 200 communication requests from alien species across the galaxy. Most of them wanted the same thing, more information about something called human sound making or emotional vibrations. The Admiral rubbed his tired eyes. He had spent 30 years dealing with alien politics, trade disputes, and border conflicts. Never had he seen anything like this sudden interest in human culture. The reports all traced back to a single incident on New Geneva Station involving a maintenance worker with a violin. His aide, Lieutenant Kate Morrison, brought him another stack of messages. Sir, the Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session. Apparently, their regular meetings have been disrupted because delegates keep leaving to search for human musicians. Ryan picked up the first report. It was from Ambassador Kefter of the Zephyrian Collective. The diplomat described Jake Martinez's performance in words that seemed almost desperate. The ambassador had used phrases like consciousness expansion, an emotional awakening to describe what humans simply called music. Get me Dr. Amy Foster, Ryan ordered. We need our best xenocultural specialist on this immediately. Dr. Foster arrived at fleet headquarters 6 hours later. Her transport ship having broken several speed records to get there. She was a small woman with bright eyes who had spent her career studying how different species communicated and expressed themselves. Her office at the University of Mars was filled with alien art, sculptures, and communication devices. Admiral, "I've been reviewing the reports during my flight," she said as she entered his office. "This is incredible. We might be looking at the first truly universal form of human expression that works across all known species." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, doctor." Amy pulled up a holographic display showing brain scans from different alien species. Every intelligent species we've encountered has developed complex technology, mathematics, and logical thinking. But when we look at their cultural expressions, they're all based on information transfer or practical communication. She pointed to different sections of the brain scans. The Zephyrians have elaborate light displays that convey data. The Vorthans create geometric patterns that represent mathematical concepts. The Chitons use chemical markers to share experiences. But none of them have developed what we call art, expression designed purely to create emotional responses. So, music is unique to humans. Not just music, Amy said excitedly. The way humans organize sound, color, movement, and words to make others feel specific emotions. We're apparently the only species that creates things just to make others happy, sad, excited, or peaceful. Meanwhile, back on New Geneva Station, Jake Martinez was discovering that his life had become very complicated. Word of his performance had spread through the alien quarters faster than a computer virus. Every time he walked through the corridors, aliens would stop him and ask him to make the feeling sounds again. Commander, Lisa Brooks had given him permission to perform in the plaza during off hours, but now she was dealing with a different problem. Alien ships were arriving at the station specifically to hear human music. The docking bays were filling up with visitors who had no official business other than cultural curiosity. Jake set up his violin case in the plaza for the third time that week. The crowd that gathered was even larger than before. Ambassador Kethter was there again, along with dozens of other aliens Jake didn't recognize. Some had traveled for days just to hear him play. He started with chasing cars again since. That seemed to affect him the most. But this time he noticed something different. A few of the aliens were moving their bodies in time with the music. The Vorthan engineer Tel 906 was swaying slightly, his rock-like body creating small rhythmic motions. After the song ended, a young Aquarian approached Jake. Her name was Selenine, and she spoke through her environmental suit's translator. "Human. Jake, my species creates patterns with bioluminescent displays in our oceans. But your sounds make me feel things our patterns never do. Could you teach me to understand this better?" Jake smiled. "I'm not really a teacher. I just play what feels right. But how do you know what will make others feel specific emotions?" asked Dr. Yelef, the station's medical officer. Both of her Centaurian brains were working hard to understand the concept. Jake thought for a moment. "I guess I play what makes me feel something, and hope it makes you feel something too. The song I played is about wanting to be close to someone you care about how simple moments can be the most important ones." The aliens exchanged looks of confusion and wonder. The idea that someone could deliberately create sounds to share their internal emotional state was completely foreign to them. 3 sectors away, Captain Ben Rodriguez was having his own musical encounter. His cargo ship, the Dancing Bear, was loaded with supplies for a mining colony in the Outer Rim. His crew of 12 humans had a tradition of playing Earth music during loading and unloading operations to make the boring work more enjoyable. But when they arrived at Kepler Station, something unexpected happened. The alien dock workers stopped moving when the music started playing through the ship's external speakers. A group of Chiton stevedores stood frozen in the middle of unloading crates, their insect-like bodies trembling. "Captain," called his first. "Officer Maria Santos, the dock supervisor wants to know what we're doing to his workers." Ben looked out at the loading bay. 50 alien workers were standing perfectly still, listening to an old Earth song called Sweet Carolyn. Some of them seemed to be enjoying it. The dock supervisor, a tall Nexari with silver skin and large black eyes, approached the ship. "Human captain, your vessel is emitting strange audio frequencies." My workers have stopped their duties too. Listen, it's just music, Ben explained. We play it while we work. It helps us stay motivated. The Nexari tilted his head. Music. We have heard reports of this from other stations. These audio patterns affect productivity? Well, yeah. Good? Music makes work feel easier. Within an hour, Ben found himself giving an impromptu concert on the loading dock. Word spread through Kepler Station, and soon aliens from every corner of the facility were gathered to hear the Dancing Bears music collection. Back on Earth, Dr. Foster was presenting her preliminary findings to the Earth Council. The room was filled with politicians, scientists, and military officials, all trying to understand what was happening. The implications are staggering, she said. For the first time in galactic history, humans have something that every other species wants to learn about. Not our technology, not our resources, but our ability to create and share emotions through art. President Claire Johnson leaned forward. Are you saying that music could be more valuable than our manufacturing or agricultural exports? I'm saying it could be our ticket to true acceptance in the galactic community, Amy replied. For 50 years, we've been seen as a minor species, young, primitive, useful mainly for labor and basic goods. But this changes everything. We have something unique that they can't replicate or steal. The president looked around the room. Recommendations? We need to start training cultural ambassadors immediately, Amy said. Musicians, artists, storytellers. People who can share human emotional expression with alien species. And we need to protect our artists. If other species realize how valuable human creativity is, some might try to capture or exploit our musicians. As the meeting continued on Earth, Jake Martinez finished another performance on New Geneva Station. The crowd of aliens was larger than ever, and some of them were attempting to hum along with the melodies. It wasn't quite right. Their vocal cords were designed for different sounds, but the intent was clear. Commander Brooks watched from her office, realizing that her space station had become the center of the most important cultural exchange in galactic history. A maintenance worker with an old violin had accomplished what decades of diplomacy couldn't. He had made aliens see humans as something special. Jake packed up his violin, thinking about the strange turns his life had taken. A few days ago, he was just fixing air filters and playing music for spare change. Now, apparently, he was some kind of ambassador for his entire species. He looked up at the stars, visible through the great window, and wondered what would happen next. Captain Ben Rodriguez had never thought of himself as a diplomat. He was a cargo hauler, pure and simple. His job was to move goods from one place to another as quickly and safely as possible. But in the 3 weeks since the incident at Kepler Station, his life had become anything but simple. The Dancing Bear was currently docked at Titan Base, a massive trading hub in the asteroid belt. Ben's crew was supposed to be loading agricultural supplies for the colony worlds, but once again, work had come to a complete stop. 200 alien dock workers stood in the cargo bay, listening to his ship's music system play an old Earth song called Don't Stop Believing. Captain, the station master is requesting another meeting, said Maria Santos, his first officer. She was trying not to smile, but Ben could see the amusement in her eyes. The station master was a Vorthan named Grix 442, whose rock-like exterior usually showed no emotion. But lately, Grix had been asking Ben to extend his stays at Titan Base. The official reason was cultural exchange. But Ben suspected the real reason was that productivity had increased by 400% when human music was playing. Tell him I'll be there in an hour, Ben said. And Maria, start playing the classical playlist. The aliens seemed to like that batch fellow. As the first notes of air on the G string filled the cargo bay, Ben watched the alien workers return to their tasks. But they moved differently now, not just efficiently, but with something that looked almost like joy. A group of chitin stevedores were actually coordinating their movements to match the rhythm of the music. On the other side, of the galaxy, tech entrepreneur Mia Chung was sitting in her office on Luna Station, staring at productivity reports that seemed too good to be true. Her company, Harmony Dynamics, had started as a simple idea. What if human music could improve workplace efficiency in mixed-species environments? The results had exceeded her wildest expectations. Factories that played carefully selected human music saw dramatic improvements in worker satisfaction and output. But more importantly, they saw something unprecedented: cooperation between species that had never worked well together before. The Nexari Zephyrian joint mining operation on Ceres has requested our full catalog, reported her assistant, Danny Walsh. They say human music is the only thing that keeps their workers from fighting each other. Mia nodded. The Nexari were logical and cold, while the Zephyrians were emotional and intuitive. The two species had barely tolerated each other for centuries. But when they worked together while listening to human music, something changed. The logical Nexari became more understanding, while the emotional Zephyrians became more focused. What about the Galactic Council project? Mia asked. Danny grinned. They want us to install our music systems in all their meeting chambers. Apparently, they're having the most productive diplomatic sessions in their history when human music is playing softly in the background. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Sophie Williams was having the strangest week of her life. A few days ago, she had been playing her guitar in the subway tunnels beneath New Tokyo, earning just enough credits to pay for food and rent. Now she was sitting in a government office, being briefed by officials from the Department of Interstellar Affairs. Miss Williams, your performance of Wonderwall has been viewed over 50 million times across 12 star systems, said Director Paul Martinez. The Galactic Cultural Exchange Board has specifically requested that you perform at their annual summit. Sophie looked down at her old acoustic guitar. The instrument was covered in stickers and had a crack along the side, but it had been her companion for years. I don't understand. It's just a song about maybe believing in something, you know? About how someone might save you when things get bad. That's exactly why they want to hear it, the director explained. Dr. Foster's research shows that human music expresses concepts that most alien species have never encountered. The idea that one person might save another, not for logical reasons, but out of love or friendship, is completely foreign to them. The briefing was interrupted when an aide rushed in with an urgent message. Sir, we have a problem. The hegemony of rational minds has issued a formal complaint to the Galactic Council. They're calling human music a cognitive weapon that disrupts proper thought processes. Director Martinez frowned. The hegemony was led by the Nexari, a species that prized logic above all else. Their civilization was built on pure reason, with no room for what they consider irrational emotions. What's their specific complaint? He asked. They claim that exposure to human music causes their citizens to make illogical decisions. Nexari workers have been requesting time off to experience feelings, and their efficiency ratings have dropped because they've started caring about things like worker comfort and personal relationships. Sophie laughed despite herself. So we're in trouble because our music makes them nicer. It's not funny, the director said seriously. The Nexari control significant portions of galactic shipping and manufacturing. If they decide human music is a threat, they could cause serious problems for Earth's trade relationships. Back on New Geneva Station, Jake Martinez was dealing with his own complications. His evening performances had become so popular that Commander Brooks had to install crowd control barriers. Hundreds of aliens gathered each night to hear him play, and the station's restaurants and shops were making more money than ever before. But Jake was also receiving some unwelcome attention. 3 times in the past week, he had noticed Nexari agents in the crowd recording his performances and taking detailed notes. They never stayed long, and they never showed the emotional responses that other aliens did. Tonight's crowd was especially large. Ambassador Kefter had brought a delegation of Zephyrian artists who wanted to learn about human musical instruments. Dr. Eulith was there with her medical equipment, still trying to understand the physical effects of music on different species. Even Tel 906, the Vorthen engineer, had brought some of his colleagues to hear what he called the feeling sounds. Jake tuned his violin and looked out at the diverse crowd. In the past month, he had learned to recognize the emotional responses of dozens of different species. The way aquarians' gills fluttered when they were moved by a sad song. How chitin's antennae twitched in time with upbeat melodies. The subtle color changes in Zephyrin's skin that indicated deep, emotional connection. He began to play chasing cars once again. But tonight he added variations, small changes in tempo and tone that he had learned would affect different species. In different ways. The Vorthens responded to deeper, more resonant notes. The Aquarians preferred higher, more flowing melodies. The Zephyrians liked complex harmonies that seemed to tell stories within stories. As he played, Jake noticed something new. Some of the aliens in the crowd were holding primitive instruments they had made themselves, simple drums, basic wind instruments, even devices that looked like string instruments. They were trying to play along with his music. The sounds they made weren't quite right. Their instruments were crude, and their understanding of melody was basic. But the intent was clear. They wanted to create music of their own, not just listen to it. After the performance, a young chiton approached Jake with something that looked like a wooden flute with multiple holes. "Human Jake, I have tried to create feeling sounds like yours. But when I play, other chitons do not respond as they do to your music. What am I doing wrong?" Jake examined the instrument. It was actually quite well made, showing considerable skill and thought. "Play something for me," he said. The chiton played a series of notes that were technically correct, but somehow empty. The melody was there, but something was missing. "You're playing the notes perfectly," Jake said. "But music isn't just about the notes. It's about what you feel when you play them. What were you thinking about when you made this song?" "I was thinking about proper note intervals and frequency ratios," the chiton replied. Jake smiled. "Try again, but this time, think about something that makes you happy, or sad, or excited. Don't think about the technical parts. Just feel something and let the music express it." The chiton tried again, and this time the melody had something different. It wasn't quite human music, but it had emotion behind it. Several other chitons in the crowd stopped talking and turned to listen. Dr. Foster, who had arrived on the station that morning, watched the exchange with fascination. She was documenting the first attempts by alien species to create their own emotional music. Her research was showing that while they could learn to play human songs, creating original music that expressed their own emotions was much more difficult. "Like they're learning a completely new language," she told Commander Brooks later that evening. "Not just the mechanics of making music, but the entire concept of expressing internal feelings through organized sound." Brooks nodded. "The question is, where does this lead? We have aliens across the galaxy trying to understand human emotions, human creativity, human art. Some of them see it as wonderful, others see it as dangerous." "Change is always frightening," Foster replied. "But I think what we're seeing is the beginning of true galactic cultural exchange. For the first time, humans have something to teach other species, not just things to learn from them." As the night shift began on New Geneva Station, Jake packed up his violin and headed home. Tomorrow. The warning came at 3 a.m. Earth time. Admiral Ryan Clark was pulled from his sleep by the urgent beeping of his emergency communicator. The message was short but terrifying. Human musicians missing. Nexari involvement suspected. Immediate response required. Within an hour, Clark was in the war room at Earth Defense Fleet headquarters, surrounded by his top officers and Dr. Amy Foster. The holographic display showed a map of the galaxy with red markers indicating the locations where human musicians had vanished. 17 confirmed disappearances in the last 48 hours, reported Colonel Pete Harrison, head of intelligence. Jake Martinez from New Geneva Station, Sophie Williams from the Luna Diplomatic Mission, Captain Rodriguez and his entire crew from the Dancing Bear, all taken while traveling through Nexari-controlled space. Dr. Foster looked pale. They're not just taking random humans. These are our most effective musical ambassadors, the people who have had the greatest impact on alien cultures. Admiral Clark studied the tactical display. The Nexari control key shipping routes and manufacturing centers throughout the galaxy. Their cold, logic-based society had always been suspicious of what they called irrational behavior, but this was the first time they had acted against humans directly. What do we know about their motives? Clark asked. Intelligence suggests they're studying human music, Colonel Harrison replied. They want to understand how it works, so they can either neutralize its effects or use it as a weapon. The thought made Clark's stomach turn. Human music was about connection, emotion, and shared experiences. The idea of turning it into a weapon felt like a violation of everything music represented. Commander Tony Baker, leader of the elite rescue unit known as the Starfire Squadron, stepped forward. Sir, give me 12 hours and I can have a team ready to extract our people. It's not that simple, Foster interrupted. The Nexari have taken them to research facilities deep in their territory. These aren't just prisons, they're laboratories. If we go in with military force, they might kill the hostages rather than let them go. Meanwhile, in a sterile research facility on the Nexari homeworld of Logica Prime, Jake Martinez sat in a white room facing a panel of gray-skinned aliens. His violin case lay on a table between them, open to reveal his cherished instrument. The lead researcher, designated as Prime Logic 7, spoke in the flat, emotionless tone that all Nexari used. Human Jake Martinez, you will demonstrate the acoustic manipulation techniques you use to disrupt rational thought processes in other species. Jake looked around the room. The walls were covered with monitoring equipment, and he could see cameras recording his every movement. I don't manipulate anyone. I just play music. You create organized sound patterns that cause measurable changes in brain chemistry, Prime Logic 7 replied. This constitutes a form of mental influence. You will explain the methodology. There is no methodology, Jake said firmly. Music isn't a science experiment. It's about feeling something and sharing that feeling with others. The Nexari exchanged glances. The concept of deliberately sharing emotions was foreign to their logical minds. They had spent 3 days trying to understand how Jake's simple songs could cause such powerful reactions in other species. In another part of the facility, Sophie Williams was being subjected to different tests. The Nexari had created mechanical instruments that could perfectly reproduce the sounds of her guitar. But when they played the same songs, they had no emotional impact on test subjects. The acoustic frequencies are identical, the research leader told her. Yet your version causes measurable neurological responses, while reproduction does not. Explain this difference. Sophie tried to put her thoughts into words. When I play, I'm thinking about the story the song tells. I'm feeling the emotions it represents. Your machines can copy the sounds, but they can't copy the feelings behind them. Feelings are illogical, the researcher replied. They serve no productive purpose. That's where you're wrong, Sophie said quietly. Feelings are what make life worth living. They're what connect us to each other. Your perfect logic might be efficient, but it's also empty. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Kelly Johnson was preparing for the most important mission of her career. A former music teacher who had joined the military after the alien contact, she was uniquely qualified to understand both the tactical and cultural aspects of the rescue operation. The Nexari had been broadcasting their attempts to weaponize human music, she reported to Commander Baker. They're using some kind of frequency modulation to create artificial music that causes psychological distress rather than pleasure. Baker frowned. Are you saying they figured out how to make music harmful? Not music, Kelly corrected. They've created acoustic weapons that sound like music, but have the opposite effect. When test subjects hear their artificial compositions, they experience fear, confusion, and disorientation instead of the positive emotions that real music creates. Dr. Foster, who was monitoring the briefing via hologram from her research station, added crucial information. My analysis suggests that the Nexari are fundamentally misunderstanding what makes human music effective. They think it's about the specific frequencies and patterns, but it's actually about the genuine emotion and intent behind the performance. Commander Baker nodded. So their weapons won't work on humans? Exactly. Humans can instinctively tell the difference between authentic music and mechanical imitation. But other alien species, who are just learning about music, might be more vulnerable to these artificial compositions. The rescue mission launched 12 hours later. Baker's team used a small, fast ship that could avoid detection by Nexar patrol fleets. Their plan was simple: get in, extract the human musicians, and get out before the enemy could respond. But as they approached Logica Prime, they discovered that the Nexari had already begun testing their acoustic weapons. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy about alien workers becoming ill after exposure to broadcasts from Nexari facilities. On the Zephyrian colony world of Harmony, Ambassador Kefter was rushed to medical facilities after listening to what he thought was a new human musical composition. Instead of the peaceful emotions he expected, the sounds had caused severe disorientation, and panic. Similar incidents were reported throughout Nexari space. The artificial music was being broadcast as a test, and aliens who had learned to love human music were being hurt by these twisted imitations. Baker's team infiltrated the research facility just as the Nexari were preparing to expand their acoustic weapon tests. Using stealth technology and careful planning, they reached the detention area where the human musicians were being held. Jake Martinez was weak but unharmed when Baker found him. Commander, they're trying to turn music into a weapon. They don't understand that music is about bringing people together, not hurting them. We know, Baker replied as he freed Jake from his restraints. Can you still play? Jake nodded and picked up his violin. Why? Because we're going to need real music to counter their fake music. Dr. Foster thinks that authentic human performance can neutralize their acoustic weapons. As Baker's team evacuated the facility, they encountered unexpected resistance. The Nexari had activated their acoustic weapons throughout the building, filling the corridors with harsh sounds designed to cause confusion and fear. But the weapons had no effect on the humans. Jake, Sophie, and the other rescued musicians could hear that the sounds were artificial, empty of genuine emotion. To them, the acoustic weapons were just unpleasant noise. Kelly Johnson set up a portable amplifier in the facility's main corridor. Jake, can you play something? Something real? Jake raised his violin and began to play Chasing Cars. The simple, honest melody cut through the harsh, artificial sounds like a knife through paper. The Nexari acoustic weapons seemed to falter, their cold frequencies unable to compete with the warmth of genuine human emotion. Other rescue musicians joined in. Sophie played her guitar. Captain Rodriguez and his crew added their voices in harmony, and soon the facility was filled with real music instead of artificial noise. The effect on the Nexari guards was immediate and unexpected. Instead of becoming more aggressive, they stopped fighting. Many of them stood perfectly still, experiencing genuine human music for the first time in their lives. Some began to show signs of emotion, confusion, wonder, and something that might have been sadness. Prime Logic 7 watched from the control room as his carefully planned acoustic weapons were rendered useless by a simple human song about love and connection. For the first time in his long life, he felt something that his logical mind couldn't categorize or dismiss. Baker's team escaped with all the human musicians, but they left behind something more powerful than any weapon: the realization that authentic emotion could not be replicated, weaponized, or destroyed by cold logic. As their ship fled toward human space, Jake looked back at the Nexari homeworld and felt something unexpected: pity. The Nexari had spent so much energy trying to understand and control human music that they had missed its true purpose: to remind people that they were not alone in the universe. What happens now? Sophie asked. Kelly Johnson, monitoring communications from across the galaxy, had part of the answer. The Nexari acoustic weapons are failing everywhere. Alien populations that have. The attacks began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. Nexari warships appear without warning over 3 human colony worlds. Their dark hulls bristling with weapons that look nothing like conventional military hardware. Instead of energy cannons or missile launchers, the ships carried massive, acoustic transmitters designed to broadcast their artificial music across entire planets. On the farming world of New Kansas, colonist Emma Davis was feeding her chickens. When the first wave hit, the sound came from everywhere at once, a twisted version of music that made her feel sick and afraid. But after a few seconds of confusion, she realized something important. It wasn't real music. The sounds had no heart, no genuine feeling behind them. "Kids, get inside," she called to her children. "And turn on the radio. Play some real Earth music as loud as you can." Across the colony, other humans were having the same reaction. The Nexari acoustic weapons, designed to cause panic and confusion, simply didn't work on the people they were supposed to target. Humans could instinctively tell the difference between authentic music and mechanical imitation, but the alien settlers on New Kansas weren't so lucky. The Zephyrian farmers who worked alongside the humans began showing signs of severe distress. Their colorful skin turned gray, and many collapsed in their fields. Overwhelmed by the artificial frequencies, Admiral Clark received the battle reports in his command. Center on Earth, the situation was worse than anyone had expected. The Nexari weren't just attacking human colonies. They were targeting any world where humans and aliens lived together, using their acoustic weapons to turn human music from a force of unity into a source of division and fear. "They're trying to make aliens afraid of human music," Dr. Foster explained during an emergency briefing. "If aliens start to associate human music with pain and confusion, we lose everything we built." Captain Ben Rodriguez, recently rescued from the Nexari Research Facility, raised his hand. "What if we fight back with real music? My crew and I proved that authentic human performance can counter their artificial stuff." Colonel Harrison looked skeptical. "Captain, they have a fleet of warships. You have a cargo vessel." "But we also have something they don't," Ben replied. "We have friends." He was right. In the week since the Dancing Bear had started its musical cargo runs, Ben and his crew had made connections with aliens across the galaxy. Traders, dock workers, station managers, and diplomats who had been touched by human music and wanted to help protect it. Within hours, an unlikely fleet began assembling at the edge of human space. The Dancing Bear was joined by dozens of alien ships, Zephyrian art vessels, Vorthan mining barges, Chiton transport pods, and even a few Aquarian deep space explorers. None of them were military ships, but all of them carried something more powerful than weapons: musicians. The alien crew members had spent weeks learning to play simple human instruments and create basic melodies. Their music wasn't technically perfect, but it came from genuine emotion and real friendship with humans. Dr. Foster watched the fleet gathering through long-range sensors. "This is unprecedented. Different species working together, not for trade or politics, but to defend the concept of artistic expression itself." The first major battle took place in the Kepler system, where the Nexari had cornered a human diplomatic mission on the space station, where Ben had first performed for alien dock workers. The station's population was a mix of dozens of species, and the Nexari acoustic weapons were causing chaos among the non-human residents. Ben's makeshift fleet arrived to find Nexari ships surrounding the station, broadcasting their artificial music at maximum power. Alien civilians were fleeing in panic while human residents tried desperately to help them understand that the sounds weren't real music. "All ships, this is the Dancing Bear," Ben announced over the communication channels. "Time to show them what real music sounds like." The cargo ship positioned itself between the Nexari fleet and the station. Ben's crew set up their instruments in the ship's loading bay, with the external speakers aimed at both the enemy ships and the terrified aliens on the station. They began with amazing grace, played by Maria Santos on a simple flute. The melody was clear and honest, cutting through the Nexary's artificial noise like sunlight through storm clouds. One by one, the alien ships in Ben's fleet joined in with their own instruments and voices. The effect was immediate and dramatic. On the space station, aliens who had been fleeing in terror suddenly stopped. They could hear the difference between the mechanical Nexari broadcast and the authentic music coming from Ben's fleet. The real music made them feel safe and connected, while the artificial sounds just made noise. But the battle wasn't over. The Nexari responded by increasing the power of their acoustic weapons, trying to drown out the human music with sheer volume. Their artificial compositions grew louder and more discordant, designed to cause maximum psychological damage. That's when something unexpected happened. Tel 906, the Vorthan engineer who had first heard Jake Martinez play on New Geneva Station, was aboard one of the alien ships in Ben's fleet. He had been practicing with a simple drum made from scrap metal, learning to create rhythm patterns that expressed his species' unique emotional responses. As the Nexari weapons grew louder, Tel 906 began playing a counter rhythm on his drum. It wasn't human music, but it was authentic Vorthan emotion expressed through organized sound. Other Vorthans in the fleet heard it and began adding their own rhythmic patterns. Soon, each species in the mixed fleet was contributing their own style of music to the performance. Titans added clicking patterns that sounded like complex percussion. Aquarians created flowing melodies that moved like water. Zephyrians added harmonic layers that painted colors in the mind. Lieutenant Kelly Johnson, monitoring the battle from Earth, watched in amazement as real-time audio analysis showed the artificial Nexari frequencies being completely overwhelmed by the combined music of a dozen different species working together. "It's not just human music anymore," she reported to Admiral Clark. "They're creating something new, a truly galactic musical collaboration." The Nexari fleet commander, Logic Admiral Stern 9, stared at his readouts in confusion. His acoustic weapons were designed to exploit the emotional vulnerabilities that human music had revealed in alien populations. But instead of causing fear and confusion, the music coming from the enemy fleet was making his own crew behave strangely. For the first time in Nexari history, crew members were abandoning their posts not out of fear, but out of curiosity. They wanted to understand the sounds that made them feel things they had no words for. "Admiral, our weapons are having no effect," reported his tactical officer. "The enemy music is somehow neutralizing our frequencies." Stern 9 had spent his entire career believing that logic and efficiency were the highest goals of any civilization. But watching his carefully planned acoustic attack fail against a cargo ship and a collection of civilian vessels, he began to question everything he thought he knew about power and influence. The battle ended not with explosions or surrender, but with silence. The Nexari ships simply stopped broadcasting their artificial music and withdrew from the system. They had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by superior authenticity. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than any military communication. On worlds throughout known space, aliens who had been afraid of the Nexari acoustic weapons began seeking out human musicians and their alien collaborators. They wanted to learn the difference between real and artificial music so they could protect themselves from future attacks. On New Geneva Station, Jake Martinez was performing for his largest crowd ever when he received word of the battle. Ambassador Kefter approached him after the concert with news that would change everything. "Human Jake, the Galactic Council has called an emergency session. They want to formally recognize music as a form of diplomatic communication and establish protections for artists of all species." Jake looked around at the diverse crowd that had gathered to hear him play. Dozens of species, many of them now creating their own music, inspired by human examples, all connected by the simple desire to share emotions through organized sound. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means that what you started with your violin in this plaza has become something bigger than any of us imagined. You didn't just introduce aliens to human music. You taught the galaxy that authentic emotional expression is more powerful than any weapon. As Jake packed up his violin, he thought about the strange journey that had brought him from the streets of Mexico City to the center of a galactic cultural revolution. The Nexari had tried to turn music into a weapon, but in doing so, they had proven that real music that came from the heart, could never be corrupted or controlled. The war wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. Across the galaxy, humans and aliens were making music together, creating something new and beautiful that belonged to all of them. The Nexari could copy the sounds, but they couldn't copy the connections between people that made those sounds. Meaningful Dock Captain Rodriguez contacted Jake from his ship in the Kepler system. Jake, we're putting together the biggest concert in galactic history. Every species, every world that wants to participate. Will you help us organize it? The concert was planned for exactly 90 days after the Battle of Kepler. Every inhabited world in the galaxy will participate at the same moment, creating a wave of music that would travel from system to system at the speed of light. The event had been named Harmony Day by the Galactic Council, and preparations were happening on thousands of worlds. Jake Martinez stood on the main stage of New Geneva Station, looking out at the most diverse audience he had ever seen. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered for what organizers called the primary performance, the concert that would begin the galaxy-wide celebration. Behind him, an orchestra unlike anything in history was preparing to play. Sophie Williams sat with her guitar next to a chitin percussionist whose instrument looked like a collection of metal tubes. Captain Ben Rodriguez had brought his entire crew, along with alien musicians from a dozen different worlds. Even Tel 906, the Vorthan engineer, was there with his handmade drums, but the most remarkable sight was in the front row of the audience. Prime Logic 7, the Nexari researcher who had once tried to weaponize Jake's music, sat quietly with several other members of his species. They had requested permission to attend, claiming they wanted to understand what they had tried to destroy. Dr. Amy Foster, now serving as the galaxy's first director of interspecies cultural exchange, walked onto the stage. The crowd grew quiet as she approached the podium. 6 months ago, one man with a violin started something that none of us could have imagined, she began. Jake Martinez was just trying to share a song that meant something to him. He had no idea that he was about to change the way an entire galaxy thinks about communication, emotion, and what it means to be truly alive. In the audience, Ambassador Kefter translated her words for the Zephyrian delegation. His scales had taken on the deep blue color that indicated profound emotion. Over the past months, he had learned to play a simple wooden flute, and tonight he would perform a song he had written about his homeworld's twin sons. Today, we celebrate not just human music, but the music that all of us can create when we open our hearts to each other, Dr. Foster continued. In 90 minutes, when this concert begins, it will be broadcast to every corner of known space. But more importantly, it will be performed by musicians from every species who have learned that authentic emotion is the most powerful force in the universe. The preparation time passed quickly. Musicians checked their instruments, technicians tested the broadcast equipment, and audience members from dozens of worlds found their seats. On the viewing screens around the station, reports came in from other worlds preparing for their own performances. On Earth, the Sydney Opera House was filled with children from the Global Music Education Program, each one paired with an alien student learning to play human instruments. On the Vorthan homeworld, massive stone amphitheaters have been carved specifically for this event. Even on the distant Aquarian water worlds, underwater concert halls have been built where the music would travel through liquid instead of air. At exactly 1900 hours Galactic Standard Time, Jake Martinez walked to the center of the stage. The crowd of thousands fell silent, and across the galaxy, billions of beings waited for the music to begin. He raised his violin and began to play Chasing Cars. The melody started simple and pure, just as it had 6 months ago when he first played for a small crowd of confused aliens. But as the song progressed, other musicians began to join in. Sophie Williams added gentle guitar chords that supported the violin's lead. Captain Rodriguez and his crew began humming in harmony. Then the alien musicians added their voices. Tell 906s. Drums provided a steady heartbeat rhythm that seemed to make the entire station pulse with life. The kite and percussionists created delicate clicking patterns that sounded like rain on leaves. Ambassador Ketter's flute added a melody line that told the story of longing for home and family. As the music built, something magical happened. The different species weren't just playing the same song. They were each adding their own emotional understanding of what the song meant. The result was still recognizably chasing cars, but it had become something larger, richer, and more beautiful than any single species could have created alone. In the front row, Prime Logic 7 felt liquid forming in his eyes. For months, he had tried to understand human emotion through scientific analysis and logical frameworks. But now, listening to the music that combined human heart with alien soul, he finally understood. Emotion wasn't a weakness or a flaw in logical thinking. It was a completely different kind of intelligence that could create beauty beyond any mathematical formula. The song reached its climax, with every instrument and voice on the stage joining. Together in perfect harmony, the melody soared above the station, broadcast to every ship, every planet, every listening post in the galaxy. On worlds light years away, other musicians were playing the same song at the same moment, creating a wave of music that connected every inhabited system. As the final notes faded into silence, the audience erupted in applause. But this wasn't ordinary applause. It was a celebration that included the traditional appreciation sounds of dozens of different species. Chitons clicked their mandibles, Vorthons struck their stone-like hands together, Aquarians created bubbling sounds through their environmental suits, and Zephyrians flashed their scales in brilliant patterns of color. Dr. Foster returned to the podium. But before she could speak, Prime Logic 7 stood up. The Nexari researcher walked slowly to the stage, his usually emotionless face showing something that might have been wonder. "I request permission to make a statement," he said in his flat, mechanical voice. Jake nodded and handed him the microphone. "For 300 years, my species has believed that logic and efficiency were the highest goals of civilization," Prime Logic 7 began. "We saw emotion as a flaw, a weakness that interfered with proper thinking. When we encountered human music, we tried to control it, to weaponize it, to make it serve our logical purposes." He paused and looked around at the diverse crowd. "We were wrong. Music is not a tool to be used or a weapon to be controlled. It is a language that speaks directly to the part of consciousness that logic cannot reach. It reminds us that we are not machines calculating optimal outcomes, but living beings capable of joy, sadness, hope, and love." The Nexari researcher's voice began to change, becoming less mechanical and more natural. "My species has spent so long trying to eliminate emotion that we forgot what we lost in the process. Tonight, for the first time in centuries, Nexari citizens across our worlds are feeling things we have forgotten how to feel." He turned to Jake. "Human Jake Martinez, you have given the galaxy something more valuable than any technology or resource. You have shown us that the connections between living beings are more important than the efficiency of our systems." The audience listened in stunned silence as Prime Logic 7 continued. "The hegemony of rational minds formally apologized for our actions against human musicians and alien populations. We request permission to learn from you, not to control or weaponize your music, but to rediscover the emotional intelligence that we lost long ago." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand to the Nexari researcher. "Music belongs to everyone," he said simply. "If you want to learn, we'll teach you." 6 months later, the galaxy was a very different place. Earth's greatest export was no longer manufactured goods or raw materials, but music teachers. The Human Cultural Preservation and Sharing Initiative had established schools on hundreds of worlds. Where humans worked alongside alien instructors to develop new forms of musical expression, the Galactic Council had officially recognized music as a form of diplomatic communication, with the same protections given to language interpreters and cultural ambassadors. War between species had become almost impossible. It was hard to fight people when you had shared songs with them. On New Geneva Station, Jake Martinez was back to his regular routine. He worked his maintenance shift during the day, keeping the station systems running smoothly. But every evening, he still set up his violin case in the central plaza and played for whoever wanted to listen. The crowds were different now. Instead of confused aliens trying to understand human emotion, he played for beings from across the galaxy who had learned to create their own music. Many of them had instruments they had made themselves, inspired by human designs but adapted for their own physiology and cultural expression. Tonight, like every night, he began with Chasing Cars. But now the song had become something bigger than he had ever imagined. As he played the familiar melody, dozens of alien musicians joined in with their own instruments, creating a symphony that belonged to all of them. Commander Lisa Brooks watched from her office window, smiling at the scene below. In her files, she had reports from across the galaxy about the changes that music had brought. Crime rates were down on mixed-species worlds. Diplomatic negotiations were more successful when they included musical performances. Even scientific research was advancing faster when teams included artists alongside engineers and researchers. As Jake played the final notes of the song, he looked up at the stars visible through the great window. Somewhere out there on worlds he would never visit, beings from hundreds of different species were making music of their own.